I was never in favor of using the terms gender wars and battle of the sexes. I could use it as a metaphor, but I'd still have my reservations around casually using it. So I won't use it almost ever. What is happening with men trailing behind women is endemic of what we have been talking about since forever. Feminism is not a movement for egalitarianism. Feminists are tearing apart restrictions placed on them while strengthening the expectations placed on men in their obvious quest to establish a matriarchy with the hegemonic dominion of women and their allies, such as trans women and lesbians. The current balance of power in the family matters is completely lopsided in favor of them. I would like to inform you that family is a seat and a progenitor for large-scale social hierarchies as they socialize and inculcate into the young the proper values and roles to be enacted in social interactions even after they leave the home. After all, the Victorians, for example, weren't prudish and frigid just because sex is not a fun topic, and men didn't lead the family because they were merely bored. The removal of men from the home was at the heart of feminism to undo the influence of patriarchal elements that protect the interests of men. The interests of men have to be communicated from then on in matriarchal societies through women or women-like individuals, and, if communicated through men, it's passed through a maternal filter. Men's transience and superfluous state in the modern society is a cause of celebration for the twisted people who relish in the fact that past injustices are being addressed now with eye for an eye method of vigilante justice. Many feminists celebrate the rising tide of children out of wedlock and fathers' absenteeism in those homes. You notice how they no longer even say out of wedlock births anymore either, as it's the new matriarchal norm. Disregarding the men in the equation of life creation, such debasing is emblematic of ruthless subjugation of men. Funnily enough, it was us men who were accused of this subjugation initially. Look who's most guilty of this. We are seeing a rise of a tyrannical regime hellbent on provisioning all benefits of society to women and all of its burdens to men. And do not let them trick you into thinking that men in power are an undeniable proof of patriarchal dominion. The fact no one of them is anti-feminist and pro-male is a clear sign that they are complicit in the matriarchy, as upholding it benefits them, alongside most women. You also see that those so-called patriarchal male supremacists like MRAs and manosphere men are utterly incapable of passing through legislature that reinstitutes men's authority in the home, which is just further proof of dominion of women. The game is rigged and not playing is the most winning move. It's still, however, quite early for the feminists to declare victory. All my research shows support for feminism is waning day by day, and there's a huge opposition to trans women that fuels much more insular anti-feminism groups. Now, the National Post is a conservative publication, and it is blurting the same old tired gynocentric brainwashing in an attempt to slyly reprogram traditionalist voices to assimilate values and expectations of the new order. As any publication or a company, they have to meet the standards of affirmative action of U.S. Department of Labor and prove the adequacy of feminine influence over their work. The tactic of harpooning on the tribal instinct of valorizing the in-group and shunning the out-group is a staple of the conservative publications. This is not done through formal argumentation, as the traditionalism here is traditionalism only in name, but through sensationalist rhetoric. It's vacuous and empty, translucent and politically expedient, all in order to keep the conservative crowd sedated with a false sense of power and control. The fact that Hoff Sommers, a feminist, and Abigail Shrier, another self-described feminist, and Blair White, a trans woman, are publicized by these conservative circles should serve as a red flag as to the extent of their commitment to traditionalism. There's, however, a couple of hiccups that expose the matrix in the article, so let's begin reading.
The war between the sexes has ended, and rather than a cooperative future that could benefit all, it has turned out to be more like a lopsided win for the female side.
In common speech, we say, it turned tyrannical and sexist and misandrist, not lopsided. Obviously, to the conservative types, we are playing victimhood Olympics. Even if we are indeed victims of unfair treatment. You just don't tell them you are treated unfairly. Obviously, there's no concrete recounting of how the win is lopsided. You'd expect a brief compendium on how women are leading the charge, but here we are. They gonna keep you astray so that you never know the name of the enemy and end up being susceptible to their propaganda. I will make a wiki page that provides a quick summary on discrimination against men. It's still in the works. Back to the article.
After millennia of power struggles based on such things as biology and social function, the role of women in advanced societies has expanded dramatically, which is generally a good thing, but has some rarely cited downsides.
Gotta exalt the roles of women, however. The usual gynocentric drivel of unadulterated women worship and treating women as the backbone of everything. No mention of the expanding roles of men which proliferated since industrialization and even dovetailed into traditional roles of women. You can also sense something. A hint of something. It feels like they are arguing implicitly that men's contribution is decreasing. This is the usual, men are not doing enough. Old, tired, in its last throes.
The crux of the problem lies in the fact that as women rise, men seem to be falling. This limits opportunities to establish stable families or even find decent partners.
The crux of the problem lies in the fact they haven't dismantled systems of domination. They just overturned it, making women on top, and then reinforce the new Western hierarchy through the arms of the state. Need further proof that society is a matriarchy? And of course, the trad cucks. What do you expect from them, other than trapping you with an expensive parasitic prostitute who exposes you in myriad of ways to legal hazards and potential mental and financial ruin? You wouldn't go to jail because you are poor, but you fucking will if you can't pay child support to a woman. Tradcons are supposed to be less subject to elite manipulation and control, and here they are, trying to enslave men to keep them engaged in the exploitative system. As long as these trad cucks are wifed up, they are more than happy with the subjugation.
The Brookings Institution's Richard Reeves has found that as much as 1/3 of the decline in marriage rates is driven by the inability of women to find mates that they see as stable, smart, good earners or otherwise up to their standards.
Richard Cucked Reeves, the guy who was informed most pressing issues facing men are justice system, education, domestic violence, employment and workplace, family courts, and media representation, and then decided those could take a back seat to issues adjunct to issues facing women. He just wants to weaponize us nefariously to increase pay for women in heel sector and get legislature that institutes further dominion of women through more generous maternal leave and higher pay in the female-dominated fields of heel and more empowerment programs. Of course, you will be trailing behind, but your queens are fine, and that's what matters most to these little gynocentric agents. Protective buffers and safety nets and preferential treatment for women, passed under the auspices of creating more equitable world. The irony, man. It's astounding.
The gap between the sexes has been driven in large part by shifting rates of educational achievement. In the United States, women now collect nearly 60% of bachelor's degrees. In Canada, they have accounted for most university graduates for at least a decade.
That's quarter of the story. The gap was driven by Title IX, reverse sexism or to use their cute counterpart, positive discrimination, and many affirmative action and empowerment programs that allowed women easier access to education and jobs, for example, grants, scholarships, quotas, internships, and not to mention those make-work policies that clearly discriminate against men. Then you got the abolition of programs that benefit men, such as the ones in GI bills for men coming back from war. Not to talk about the rampant reimagining of schools to emphasize the learning styles of girls, for example, the shutting down of fraternities, making homework worth more grades, and including exercises that deal with emotions or that rely mostly on rote memorization.
To be sure, the long-standing pay gap between men and women still exists, but women are making progress towards the top echelon in Canada. As well as the U.S., women started a majority of all new firms in the U.S. in 2020 and 2021. Men still earn more. But among young adults aged 20 to 24, the income gap has narrowed to just US $43, see $58 a week.
What in the fucking fucked up fuck? You are a conservative publication. You even call yourself National Post. Are you kidding me by bringing up wage gap? I read the studies, and it seems about 10% of pay gap is a result of unequal pay for equal work. Unequal pay for equal work is a crime, and you can sue the company into oblivion and get more than your labor's worth for the time they swindled you. Look at it from this perspective. Homicide is a crime that haven't stopped murderers from killing. After all, law grants you protection in courts, not protection from the crimes themselves.
The biggest divide may be found among the working class. Many workers, especially those with jobs tied to physical labor, have faced extreme pressures from both foreign competition and regulatory restraints. Today, according to demographer Nicholas Eberstadt, employment rates among men are at Depression-era levels.
Here we go with the propagandist bullshit. Nicholas Eberstadt is another gynocentric cuck spewing male decline hysteria to bolster support for feminist causes. He wrote the book The Men Without Work. Look, the most impacted sectors over the last 2 years were in recreational services and accommodation and food services, which are female-dominated. Men's employment went down, but not as bad as that of women. The actual case is about the hypergamous nature of women, not allowing them to settle for men who are not among top earners. But as for men not being economically feasible is a grandiose bullshit from entitled twats. You realize in poor African countries women marry and stay with their husbands as they live in shanties. A shanty is absolutely never enough for a woman in the West, neither is the average home, or the average job and the average looks. They only shoot for the 6 6s, and if they have to settle for less, they resent the husband. To this day, the biggest predictor of marriages breaking down is the wife earning more than their husbands.
As Reeves notes, men are increasingly left behind plagued by psychological disorders and a lack of friends, and remain outside the economy.
Little cucked Reeves again. Gotta exploit the less than favorable state of men to advance feminist agenda somehow. Men report more happiness than women, and remaining outside the economy is none of your business.
Some feminists may celebrate this decline.
Of course. Are we under any pretension as to their true intentions? This is what they always wanted.
But it does not bode well for women, at least outside the job market. In many areas, such as self-harm and depression, teen girls generally suffer more than men. According to psychologist Jonathan Haidt, while the percentage who have contemplated suicide has surged.
What's the connection between the two phenomenon? This is a desperate attempt at establishing positive causal relationship between harm done to men and harm befalling women. The fact they resorted to a silly weak link between the two is a tacit admission of the fact women are indeed generally doing better than men. The editorial felt hard-pressed to prove the decline of men is adversely affecting women's mental health, but as they previously stated, men are increasingly left behind plagued by psychological disorders and a lack of friends. That's rebuttal to their point using their own argumentation. The absolute sorry state of journalistic integrity and analysis, but such a thing you'd expect from VG worshippers. Anyhow, thank you for listening. There are more videos in the works. See you in the next video.